Orlando?
Oh man, I love Orlando. The beach, the theme parks, the sunshine.
No, no, no. Hi, I'm Heather.
I'm Des.
And I'm Donna.
We're going to talk about Ida Jean Orlando, a revolutionary theorist, nurse, researcher, and educator that changed the nursing process into what we see today. She was born to Irish immigrants in the 1926 in New York. Her journey to nursing began with getting her diploma of nursing from New York Medical College School of Nursing in 1947. She started her career working in the ER and obstetrics, but finally found her true passion in psychiatric nursing and mental health. She continued her education in Brooklyn, New York, receiving her BSN with a focus in public health from St. John's University in 1951. From there, she attended Yale, receiving a master's degree in mental health nursing in 1954. Her excellence in her field led her to an assistant professorship as well as becoming the director of the same graduate program she attended, the exact same year she received her degree. Experience as the director, as well as funding from the National Institute of Health, would become the foundation for her theory of dynamic nurse patient relationships. Her passion and commitment to holistic nursing, to understanding the patient and patient's need, as well as providing revolutionary education, led to her writing the book, The Dynamic Nurse Patient Relationship Function, Process, and Principles in 1961. Later, she further expanded her authorship to include the discipline and teaching of the nursing process in 1972 in order to provide educators specific guidelines on educating new nursing students. The establishment of the theory of the dynamic nurse-patient relationship came as a result of her evaluation and observation of over 2,000 nurse-patient encounters while being the director of the mental health nursing program of Yale. During these observations, she concluded that nursing was too focused on the following the orders of the physicians and carrying out institutional policies, leaving a void in patient care, especially the patient's needs. This inductive process, along with her own experiences, led to her modifying the educational practices of her program, as well as developing a nursing process that is still in practice today. Ida Jean Orlando passed November 28, 2007, but her legacy still changes nursing and patient care to this day.
Every great theory is comprised of assumptions as well as concepts that merge to form the components of the theory. The dynamic nurse-patient relationship comes with several assumptions. First, it assumes that all patients have or anticipate hopelessness or helplessness. Secondly, responsiveness to this distress is the foundation of nursing care. The focus of patient care is providing assistance during this time of need, because nursing is a needs-based service. And lastly, the final assumption is that communication is the foundation to all social dynamics. The purpose of the dynamic nurse-patient relationship was to develop and implement a professional nursing process that addresses the patient's needs through effective nursing care. It later expanded to incorporate curriculum and education practices to teach nursing students this framework. The theory expounded upon four major components. The first component is the nursing process. Orlando believed nursing is a series of exchanges that occur between the patient and nurse, in which the nurse assesses the patient, identifies the diagnosis of those needs, plans and implements the changes the patient needs, and then evaluates its effectiveness. The process repeats during each subsequent encounter. The second component is understanding. By understanding and being aware of the influences of the perceptions, thoughts, and feelings of both parties, more effective nursing care can occur. Both direct and indirect observation, as well as expressing understanding, can open the pathway to a better interaction. The third component is the nurse-patient interaction itself. Each interaction is uniquely specific with its own dynamic that evolves over a series of interactions. By using the understanding of themselves and the situation, The nurse can establish communication based on these in order to address the needs and behaviors of the patient. This creates a rich and highly effective encounter for both parties. The last component is independence. Though it seems to deviate from the other three components, it may be the most significant for the nurse. Orlando believed that nursing had become reactionary rather than actionary. The purpose of nursing has been lost to order taking and policy fulfilling. By expressing how nursing is independent of these variables, Orlando paved the way to establish nursing as its own unique profession in which these relationships can develop.
These components show a repeating trend of underlying concepts. Assessment, or the act of actively investigating the situation to establish understanding of the patient's needs, is one of the primary intentions of Orlando's framework. To properly assess, the nurse must fully understand the concept of the patient's needs. Need is seen as the actions or services a patient requires to decrease the patient's suffering or helplessness. Communication, Orlando asserted, was the foundation of human interaction as well as the nurse-patient relationship, thus making it vital and necessary part of the nursing practice. Communication provides an avenue to explore needs and potential actions. Actions, or the care provided to address the patient's need or distress, are implemented by the nurse to provide care and decrease that distress. And lastly, the relationship is the engagement between the nurse and the patient to develop a partnership working towards a mutual goal. Though independently, each concept stands alone to reflect the nursing patient experience. When all concepts are combined, we develop a clear picture of what the theory stands on. Even with solid concepts and components, an effective theory must be analyzed.
An important step of any theory analysis is to consider logical adequacy. This includes asking questions such as, does the theory make sense? Can the ideas hold up independent of their meaning or context? And are there any logical fallacies, meaning do the relationships, concepts, and the outcomes match? Orlando's theory makes a lot of sense. Communication is required to form a relationship and understand patient needs. Therefore, nurses can agree that effective nurse-patient communication is an essential component of nursing care, regardless of setting. Logical adequacy is also evident through clarity of relationships among concepts. Orlando's nurse-patient relationship theory has stated relationships, such as that between the nurse-patient interactions and understanding the meaning of a patient's behavior. There is also an implied relationship between the nursing process, interactions, and patient behaviors. Finally, Orlando's concepts are testable, which will be discussed later in relation to research, and the outcomes are predictable, regardless of the content. A theory can be logical, but holds little value if it's not actually useful. For nursing theory to be useful, it must have the ability to influence one or more areas: nursing practice, education, research, or administration. In relation to practice, Orlando's work is useful to guide nursing approaches. The dynamic nurse-patient relationship theory reinforces the value of human transactions between the nurse and the person receiving care. This concept is valuable because human transactions occur every time a nurse provides care, even if the interaction is with a family member or support person. Orlando's nursing process provides a solid framework to guide practice. In fact, the American Nurses Association describes the nursing process as the essential core of practice for the registered nurse to deliver holistic, patient-focused care. Facilities that utilize Orlando's nursing processes promote continuity of care and documentation because it creates that standardized approach. Another benefit of the nursing process is that it encourages the nurse to identify patient-specific needs, take nursing action to address those needs, monitor outcomes, and evaluate effectiveness of the nursing action. The evaluation step recognizes if the action produced positive outcomes, which is typically a goal of nursing care, or it helps highlight a need to consider other interventions. A specific example of the usefulness of this theory in practice is that when applied to fall prevention, there is a decreased immediate potential for falls. That is just one example that shows how Orlando's concepts guide practice and can promote improved patient outcomes.
Usefulness in research. Now we'll examine the usefulness of this theory in research. Research is one way to test and determine the value of a specific theory. Orlando's concepts have been used in research to test the impact of the nurse-patient relationship and to also monitor outcomes of the nursing process. For example, using Orlando's relationship theory as a guide, researchers developed and tested a safety agreement tool among patients threatening self-harm. A positive outcome was that the use of the tool promoted improved nurse-patient relationships, which have been associated with positive patient outcomes. In another study, nursing students applied concepts of the dynamic nurse-patient relationship to conduct needs-based surveys. The surveys were used to identify and address gaps in care stemming from the language disparities. Without healthy nurse-patient relationships, participants may not have been comfortable completing the surveys. In another study based in a psychiatric hospital setting, nursing care processes and barriers to use the systemic nursing process were evaluated in relation to Orlando's theory. Analysis indicated that the process promoted improved quality of care and the nurses felt the process was useful. The findings also included barriers to the application of the nursing process and recommendations for future research to improve the nursing process. Next, we look at the usefulness of a nursing theory in educational settings. Orlando's dynamic nurse-patient relationship theory has been used in education to develop structured curriculum training for practice nurses. For example, a group curriculum for nurse-led psychoeducational groups in inpatient psychiatric settings was based on this theory. Orlando's theory is highly utilized in nursing education across the world. If asked, most nurses would say they have been taught some form of the nursing process influenced by Orlando's work. However, it is important to note that the standard nursing process taught today has evolved from Orlando's original description. Orlando's nursing process was more circular in nature and took place during individual encounters, whereas today's version is more linear and is not always completed within one interaction. Here's a quick overview of how Orlando's nursing process has evolved. Orlando originally described a three-phase nursing process to include patient needs, the response of the nurse, and nursing action in 1961. Over 20 years later, in 1985, the World Health Organization added planning, resulting in a four-stage nursing process. Sometime after that, nursing diagnosis was added, completing the five-step process taught today. Nurse education programs often refer to the nursing process using the mnemonic ADPI, which stands for Assessment, Diagnosis, Planning, Intervention, and Evaluation. ADPI is typically used in care plans to help nursing students develop patient-specific goals and measures outcomes of nursing intervention. A major benefit of teaching the standardized nursing process is that it is actually useful and can be easily carried into practice. As the American Nurses Association puts it, the five-step nursing process is a common thread uniting different types of nurses who worked in varied areas.
Now that we have determined the dynamic nurse-patient relationship theory is valuable to nursing practice, research, and education, we will look at usefulness of the theory in nursing administration. Administrations that incorporate Orlando's theory through policies and a standard nursing process may see overall increased quality and continuity of care. Whereas if each nurse practices and documents differently, the care may fluctuate more from nurse to nurse. Policies that streamline nursing documentation using a shared nursing process like Orlando's can facilitate easier transition of care from one care provider to another. Dynamic nurse-patient relationship theory emphasizes communication and individualized care, which ultimately enhances the patient experience. An organization that supports positive nurse-patient relationships and patient-centered care will likely have better patient satisfaction and improved health outcomes. Administrations can promote meaningful interactions by providing staff with education on communication and ways to develop healthy nurse-patient relationships. Patients often equate time with connection. So administrations who believe in the power of Orlando's dynamic nurse-patient relationship should consider staffing ratios that allow the nurse to spend time with patients, with the goal to form better relationships while addressing care needs. To evaluate a theory for parsimony, one must determine if it can be simply explained and easily understood. Historically, grand nursing theories such as Orlando's are perceived as less parsimonious due to the broad nature of grand theories and use of human subjects, which are complex in nature. However, as highlighted earlier, the dynamic nurse-patient relationship theory is broken down into only 3 basic assumptions and 4 major components, making it comparatively parsimonious. Orlando's theory clearly defined concepts related to the nurse-patient relationship in a simplistic manner, which is a characteristic of parsimony. The nursing process evolving from Orlando's work is easy to understand and implement, making it equally parsimonious. The use of the mnemonic ADPI provides a brief, memorable description of each step of the nursing process. Despite several concepts and definitions, the essence of Orlando's theory is simple. The nurse-patient relationship is essential to identifying and understanding patient needs so that effective nursing care can be delivered. Regarding testability, the question is whether or not a theory can be supported by data or research. As noted in some of the examples on usefulness in research, the dynamic nurse-patient relationship and adaptations of Orlando's nursing process have been tested and have shown improved patient outcomes and quality of care. In addition to being parsimonious and testable, Orlando's concepts are generalizable, meaning they can be applied across settings with similar results. Concepts of the theory are broad and can be easily applied to every nurse-patient interaction, regardless of setting. This allows the theory to be relevant to all nurses. Although the attributes of Orlando's theory were extracted from an analysis of not just a few, but thousands of individual nurse-patient interactions, which lends to credibility. Evidence favors Orlando's nursing process as an effective framework for nursing care, proving the value of this theory.
Analysis has shown that Orlando's theory makes sense and is useful, but how can it be applied in today's nursing practice? Since nurses are generally the first members of the healthcare team to interact with patients, the quality of interactions makes a difference. The first impression of the patient is the receptiveness of the nurse to their needs. This first impression will influence the overall view of the care received. This is why Orlando's theory, which focuses on nurse-patient relationship, becomes so important to nursing practice. Orlando stated that 3 elements present in any nursing encounter are the behavior of the patient, reaction of the nurse, and the nursing action undertaken to benefit the patient. Those 3 elements are the foundation of nursing process and the nurse-patient relationship that is used by nurses of all educational levels, including advanced practice. When applied to practice, the results are improved relationships, better understanding of the condition and treatment plan, and overall improved health outcomes. So let's look at an example. Jim comes in for a follow-up visit with his nurse practitioner to discuss hypertension. Jim had gone to see another provider for the same concern, but he felt that the provider rushed through the appointment and simply told him to just take the meds without listening to his concern. When the nurse practitioner enters the room, Jim is obviously distressed. He's pacing back and forth, he's wringing his hands, and he states, "I'm afraid I'm going to die and have a stroke because my blood pressure is too high." By sitting down with Jim and listening to the nurse practitioner, was able to answer his questions, ease his concerns, and gain his trust. The two agreed on a treatment plan that he was comfortable with and scheduled a follow-up visit to evaluate the effects of new blood pressure medicine. Let's look at how the nurse practitioner applied Orlando's concepts when caring for Jim. Communication is an important aspect when applying the dynamic nurse-patient relationship to the advanced practice role. The nurse practitioner in the example used communication techniques that allowed a healthy nurse-patient relationship to develop. During the encounter, the nurse practitioner monitored Jim's behavior and sought to understand and ease the distress he was experiencing, which aligns with the purpose of nursing according to Orlando's theory. The nurse practitioner used the positive nurse-patient relationship to collaboratively develop a treatment plan alongside the patient. As Orlando would say, the nurse practitioner took nursing action to assist the patient. After prescribing new medication, the nurse practitioner asked Jim to come back to assess whether or not the intervention was helpful, which is a prime example of the evaluation phase of the nursing process applied to practice. So as you can see in this example, using the dynamic nurse-patient relationship made the patient more comfortable and his immediate needs were met. The nursing process guided the nurse practitioner during the interaction and prompted a follow-up assessment. Advanced practice nursing using nurses, Orlando's concepts as a framework can benefit from improved relationships, improved patient outcomes, and higher satisfaction of care, all of which can make the nurse practitioner role even more fulfilling.